Progress.
Let's hope that echo doesn't go to infinity.
Alrighty, everybody, it's 8 o'clock. We're going to give it a couple more minutes and then we'll start this. There is going to be a slight echo due to some microphone communication. Me and Dale are on a phone call right now, so hopefully when Dale's talking, we don't have the echo.
From the previous month, for example, what was discussed, if there any, what were your goal resolutions, so you guys feel that.
John, that's you.
We can hear your beautiful wife.
Oh, okay. Hold on. Let me, she's conducting business.
Gonna go ahead and mute a few other people that aren't muted. Just because.
We'll start around 8:05. That way we can let people join and make sure everyone's comfortable.
I lost you.
Dale, can you hear us?
Yeah, I'm back.
Beautiful. So those of you that are on right now, if you've got any questions for PeeWee, submit them in the chat. And then basically what's going to happen is I'm going to kind of be the narrator and I will ask the questions. Just some housekeeping rules. Keep your microphone in the mute position so a bunch of people are not over talking each other, and we can let Dale do his thing.
Good evening, everyone. Good to be with James and all of you. And hopefully there's going to be answers for all your questions.
Dale, while we're waiting for some people to pour in here, I'm going to get you to just talk about this monkey shirt that you're wearing. I feel like I see you wear it at some rallies. I mean, you're obviously wearing it right now. Kind of a little icebreaker. What's going on with that?
It's just that I guess getting older, I always wanted to have a monkey on my back.
I hear you.
Oh, I see a question from John. The thing about traveling on a caravan with Wally is that he was the leader and he had all of the responsibility, but he also pre-planned and organized. At times, he would have meetings, and this didn't happen too often, but if he put something up like travel or this and people did not vote positive, as the leader, sometimes he would have to override. But that was a very, very rare type of thing. But he would explain why he had to change the vote due to either some type of a hazard or problem that might arise. But he was very deeply respected by everybody on a caravan. Though in Africa, I will say that some of the people really that were new really didn't fit in too well. But there was a lot of the old timers on that caravan that really gave Wally the support that he needed. And of course, I was on 3 basic caravans with him. The first one when I was 12 years old and went to Mexico and Central America. At that time, It was his first one, and he was on a learning curve, getting and making sure campsites were available and such. Then going to Europe, he was pretty well seasoned by then with the various caravans that he had. Plus, he had been to Europe several times before, so he knew destinations, places to go. And of course, in Africa, that was a whole new ball game. Though there was a lot of effort and work put into finding a route and places to stay. And as a band scout, I would actually go ahead and make sure that the campsites were available. And then at times when the roads were bad or there were problems, I would stay basically with that. But Wally was always in charge, and that was his not only his personality, but of course having to run two factories. He was a leadership all the way across the board. Alice, probably anywhere from 3 to 7 days, where the roads in the cities were adequate. But getting to Ethiopia and bad roads, 100% with the caravan. Same thing basically was true in parts of the Belgian Congo. But I could go from Cape Town to Durban with Nick and I. And at that point in time, we could do at least 2 different campsites at a time. One of the things that are interesting, I know all of you have seen the signs with the red arrow and it says Wally Bayam Caravan. Well, those were particularly made for the African caravan to begin with. And so if we were ahead, we'd go into a town, talk to the mayor, talk to the police department, and find out the route and where they wanted the caravan to park. So we would put an arrow pointing to the left. That means that the caravan had to turn left. Then they might go down a mile or 2. Then there would be an arrow that said turn right. And then in about a half a mile, there's one of the signs with the arrow pointing down. Once they came to the arrow pointing down, that was their campsite. James, that's an unfair question. You already know. The best trailer I ever stayed in is in the museum. When I left Airstream in 1969, Art Costello gave me the gold trailer, and I used the gold trailer for 7 years before I sold it. The floor plan was ideal. It was wide open, and everything was convenient. And so the best trailer I ever stayed in was the gold Airstream. Well, I don't think I ever had a bad gopher hole, but if for those people that are unaware, considering that there were no dump tanks, and if you were an international rally, you're going to be there for a while. And so with a tractor with an auger bit, they would dig a deep hole. You would put a 55-gallon lid over it and use the bunghole on the lid to drain your waste into there. But in Africa, there was no gopher hole. You would say that the world is my oyster because you just go 50 yards off the road, dump your tank, and I swear today that for anybody going our route, maybe every 400 or 500 miles, when you find a dump black tank, there's an oasis with grass, trees, and just something you wouldn't imagine in the middle of nowhere. And that's a thank you to the Wally Bayam Caravan in Africa. Let's go back to the question before that. Someone was asking about the 1955 caravan. Will you post that question again?
It says, were you on the 1955 caravan where the club was started?
Yes, it was. That was my second caravan, and that was the caravan that Wally hired my mother to be the leader when he left to go on the European scout trip. And so she was brand new to Toyden Airstream. And that's a little story on itself. We're visiting Wally and Stella before the trip. So Wally takes us down to the factory on Main Street. He hitches up the trailer, shows my mother how to hitch it up, and then he takes her around the streets in downtown LA, showing her how to use the brake and all of that. So then he goes back to the factory, unhitches, has my mother hitch it up again, and then she's going to drive around the streets of LA with her rig and so on. So to that end, he got us all ready to go. And so he said to my mother, follow me. And so we go down a street and we get to a stop sign. And once we pass that stop sign, we're on Route 66. So Wally stops and pulls aside on the by the curb. And all of a sudden he waves and he points. And basically he's telling my mother, that's the way to Jackson Center, Ohio. One of the bad things was the car that we were using was the same Mercury that Wally had used on the first caravan, and it broke down in Holbrook, Arizona. And so we had to wait for a truck, and I do mean a truck. It was the Chevrolet Suburban, and at that time they really were trucks. And so here's this 5'2" little lady, my mom, learning how to tow a trailer. Now she's going to learn how to tow a trailer with a truck. And so eventually we do get to Jackson Center, and then we go on our way to Sault Ste. Marie to join the caravan before we go across the border into Canada. And so Wally and Stella leave in Montreal. Then my mother's in charge of the caravan and so on. And at that time, talking about the club being formed, there was a group in Southern California called the Jackrabbits. And they had been on caravans together. And they just didn't want to lose the fact that they were friends and enjoyed their airstreaming. So one of the couples, Earl and Pauline Arborn from the first caravan, Pauline came and actually asked Wally, can we form a club, an Airstream club? And Wally says, well, go ahead and do what's ever necessary to get it formed. So Earl and Pauline couldn't make it on the caravan, but Lewis and Alice Beatty, who were also on the first caravan, Lewis, or I should say Alice, was the mainstay and the one pushing in the nightly meetings up until we get to Campfile, Nova Scotia, and the club is formed. So that, I think, it fairly well covers it. It is the 70th anniversary. I was at the 50th anniversary when they dedicated the plaque in Campfile, Nova Scotia, and I will be on my way after the international rally to join 360, or I should say 165 Airstream families in Nova Scotia to celebrate the 70th anniversary.
Now, how far did caravans drive each day when you were involved?
What?
How far did caravans drive each day?
I think it depended on where we're going to get to a destination. I would say probably 150 miles. If there wasn't anything happening, maybe 250 miles. But if you were doing 250 miles, there might be a lot to do at that location. So you might spend maybe sometimes 3 days, but mostly 2 days, so you could take in all of the sights to see.
Do you have a favorite story that involves your mother, airstreaming?
Well, so many stories. I think the most interesting story was on the first caravan. When Wally and Stella left, Wally had a good friend of his, Waters, and Waters was supposed to be the advanced scout. Also, 5 of Wally's best trusted caravanners were also on sort of a board or a committee to help her with anything that she needed. So at some point in time, probably in New Brunswick, Waters didn't come back and tell her. He disappeared for 4 or 5 days. So my mother got a hold of Andy Charles and said, Andy, I have a problem. What do I do? And he said, well, that's up to you, but he certainly is negligent. Maybe you want to terminate him. My mother said, well, let me think about that. So I'm sitting in the trailer. My mother comes popping in, and she said, Dale, this may be the shortest employment that I've ever had. I just fired Wally's friend, Waters. That's one of my favorite stories. I have another one, too. And many of you may have heard this because it's sometimes my lead off when I give a talk. We were on the second caravan to Eastern Canada in 1957, and we were parked in Ottawa in a very nice field, and there's a little bit of an incline. And, I'm 18 years old, and so I'm chasing the ladies, and I'm up there talking about 7 or 8 ladies, all about my age, let's say. And so Charlie Kiefer, who was a kiddie, and that's what my mother always called him, was a kiddie. But he actually went on to become a president of the club. He also went to work as a caravan leader. And so he became a very important part of the Airstream world. So he stops by the trailer and he says, Helen, how's everything going? She said, well, Charlie, I need you to find Dale. Dinner's ready. And so Charlie meanders, and finally he sees me talking to all these girls. And so he comes popping in and he says, Dale, your wife's back in the trailer and she needs you to come and change the baby's diapers. You can imagine all of those girls just disappeared immediately.
That's funny. So tell me how you got the name PeeWee.
Well, I think up until I got the name PeeWee, Wally probably referred to me as Butch. Because there's indications of some of the things that I've read. So in 1951, before the first caravan, Wally had invited me to actually go on a hike with him in the high Sierras. Now, for those that don't know, that was Wally's favorite pastime. It wasn't being on a caravan or whatever. It was actually getting his burros and hiking in the high Sierras. So I didn't know, I'm 12 years old. I'm about 5'1". I may soaking wet, weigh 105 pounds. And so there's Stella, Wally, 2 boys, Clive and Gareth Glassy from San Bernardino. So the 5 of us hiked the trail from Onion Valley all the way back and over the Whitney Portal Pass. We did hike the 2 highest continental hiking passes in the United States. I said continental. And so somewhere along that, because of my short little legs or whatever, trying to keep up with these adults, Wally started calling me PeeWee. And so the PeeWee stayed with me on caravans and so on, even to on the trailers that my mother used. It would say Dale PeeWee Schwamborn. So that's how I got the PeeWee.
Now, do you have a favorite international that you've ever been to?
Boy, I've been to 5 in the early days, and I would say, I'd say right now it's a cross between Dawswell and Rock Springs. Had an enjoyable time in Rock Springs, and I think a lot of that has to do with the Vintage Airstream Club with an open tent every night, the dances, and the music people with their guitars and saxophone and all of that. That was a lot of fun. Doswell was a lot of fun. That's where I met James. But I don't know how many of you know Michael and Tina Lambert. But we had met on the International in Madison, Wisconsin in 2009. And we became instant friends. We call each other quite a few times during the year. They'll send me a birthday card or a Christmas card. And so it has been 10 years since I had seen them. And so they were in Doswell. And for that really made my trip to Doswell. And since then, I've spent a lot of other rallies, internationals with them. In fact, with the opening of the new headquarters in Jackson Center in May, I went with Michael and Tina to their home in St. Thomas, Ontario, Canada. So I guess I would say probably Doswell, but also in Doswell, I was able to have my cousin, who's retired Navy commander, come up from Williamsburg and spend the day and also sit in on the talk I gave about my mother. So yeah, maybe Doswell was about the best one.
So before we get back to some of the questions in the chat, what would you say? Would you say there's any Airstream improvements over the years that you're impressed with? Or is there something that you wish they would bring back?
Well, the one thing, the only thing that I can think of that was such a plus in the early days was the see-through. As you're driving, you look in your mirror, you can see through who's behind you. But today, you can have a camera do that for you. So, and because I'm talking to the vintage group, and I'm also a member of the vintage group, I shouldn't shame myself by answering that question. Yeah, put it quite simply, the new trailers have far more amenities that make it easier. And James, you should know that with your new trailer, with your new Airstream, you know that's a little different than what you're used to traveling in. But that doesn't. Just wait 25 years, it'll be vintage. What the hell?
I know, right? What the heck? So we've got a question from Tom and Nola. Were personal Airstreams shipped to Africa, or was Africa their home?
What?
The question is read, were personal Airstreams shipped to Africa, or was Africa their...
Oh yeah, everybody shipped. I'm not sure. There might have been one shipped out of San Pedro through the canal. There was some shipped out of New Orleans. Most all of them were shipped out of Brooklyn on the African Enterprise or sister ships. These were what should I say? Passenger freighters. The amenities. You didn't have the 10, 15 decks of 5 million people on your cruise, but you had all the good food, and you had the enjoyment of being able to cross the equator. And I would say maybe the most important thing was being able to stop at St. Helena and to go ashore and walk through the Long Street, which was the home that Napoleon was exiled to, and where he died. And so that was sort of a special thing. So that's how the trailers got to the airstream. And of course, in addition to that, of course, the tow vehicles were there, and all of those arrangements had to be made, and they were mostly made all through my mother's office.
That's amazing. Now, tell us a little bit about your mother's office and where she originated, and where the club used to be run from. You know, what were the working environments like back in the day?
Well, my dad converted our garage in our home, and eventually became a den. But until that happened, my mother, of course, started working for Airstream, and so that was the first office. And there was a good friend of hers that she had worked with in the county, and so that was my mother's helper in the beginning, and that was in our garage, and it was in our home for about 5 years, and then it moved to the second location in Bakersfield, which was a house converted into offices. And I think you have to understand, there were no computers. When you got up to 15, 20,000 people belonging to the club, those directories were all put together a hand and then sent to a printer to set up all the galleys to make the little directories. So it wasn't like it is today. My mother was very good. Any personal correspondence, she would always answer it and sign it with her own hand. She didn't have an auto writer, but she did have a stamp that could be used. But with the mimeograph machine, if there was massive mailings, say to bulletin number 1 going to Europe, then the 4 or 5 pages would be put together and then mailed out to the people who were interested in going to Europe. And then as they dropped off or whatever, there were fewer and fewer mailings, but the intensity of the bulletins might be 9 or 10 pages.
That's amazing. Next question is kind of a two-parter. So it sounds to me like your mom worked just about 7 days a week, 24/7. Where would she take her Airstream back in the day that she could kind of unplug, or did she ever do that?
Well, when she would get to an international rally, James, I have to start watching people asking questions on the screen. But
of course.
Let me answer your question. She really gained such popularity and so much love from the caravanners. When she would go to an international rally with a rig, and she would tour it across country. Sometimes she might take one of my younger cousins or a family friend with her just for companionship, but she would do all the driving. And so once she would get to an international, various men would see her pulling in, and they would shout across to each other, "Hey, Helen's here." And then they would all come over to her rig and say, "Helen, get out of your car. We'll take it from here." So they would park her rig, disconnect it, make sure that she got her gopher hole, and any of the amenities that might be like water or whatever, they would do all the connections and everything for her. And so that's basically what would happen when she would get to a rally.
That's awesome. It looks like your next question is from Alice Swimmer.
Give me a screen.
Yep. So it says, how hard was it to acquire supplies and fuel during the overseas caravans?
Well, if you have if being a group and making prearrangements, there weren't any problems. And supplies, you need, everybody has to eat. And so if you know where you're going to be, you can always stock up on food, either canned or fresh in your refrigerator, or some items in your freezer of your Dometic. And as far as fuel goes, you always kept your tanks full. The scout truck had a regular tank, probably 28 or 29 gallons, and two 32-gallon auxiliary tanks. So basically we had 100 gallons of fuel, and I just average out, well, maybe we made 10 miles per gallon. Well, that's 1,000 miles, and if you keep filling up, you're not going to run out of fuel. Well, gee, you're on the desert, or you're in an area that there's no villages and no gas pumps. So with pre-arrangements and the number of vehicles and the number of people, and again, only gasoline. There wasn't diesel and gasoline, just one fuel. Mobile and I forget the other tanker, but they would send full tankers out with gasoline, and then we would fill up the vehicles from that tanker. One time we didn't have that luxury of a tanker. We had a flatbed with full of 55-gallon drums that had gasoline, and then the gasoline was pumped from the drums into the tanks. So there was never any problem with food. That's a matter of each family managing their own what they need to eat and when they need to eat. And there was never any problem with fuel as long as you filled up when you had the opportunity.
That's amazing. Next thing, Oliver Burning says, we have one of Helen's letters from the club from 1967. She has a beautiful signature. Then
Yeah, my mother had just wonderful signature. Just the difference with Wally. It was so hard to read things that Wally wrote. There's some notebooks that Wally had, and they were miniature writings. I mean, we're talking letters less than probably 5/16 or 1/60. I mean, just, and with his bad writing, really hard to read. But my mother, her penmanship was magnificent. And one of the other things that made all of her work easy, she knew Greg's shorthand. And if you look at Greg's shorthand, it looks like reading Arabic script. So talk about someone that had the English language. She also had the shorthand language, which made it easy in meetings and so on to take notes.
that's amazing. Here's a question from a little bit before. John Schnettler says, did anyone travel these caravans with pets?
Did they what?
Did anyone have any pets with them? Like any dogs?
Oh yeah, in Europe, Wally had Chica and Penny. Chica was from the first caravan in 1952, 51. The two boys I mentioned earlier, Clyde and Garrett Classy, were 15 and 17, and they did the heavy work for Wally. And he bought them a Dodge Power Wagon and had various equipment and so on. He had enough cable to feed electricity to the trailers, but for only 12-volt electricity for turning on a light, nothing to run a refrigerator. So the two boys are driving just before we get to Oaxaca on our way home from Nicaragua, and they see this dog running around. Well, it happened to be a purebred Irish setter, and so it was just a puppy, and they brought it and gave it to Wally. At that point, if you've seen pictures of Wally, either with the Irish setter sitting and looking at him or sitting on his lap, there was a real association between the two. If you want to call it a love affair or whatever, I don't think I've ever seen a closeness between a man and a dog than Chica and Wally. So in Africa, we had one dog. We had a fellow that actually turned out to be very, very bad. It wasn't a good thing that he was on the caravan, but he had a miniature three-legged poodle. And the natives, when they would see a three-legged poodle, that really caught their eye.
Hey, Dale, it's John.
John.
If you could recommend some place that the club hasn't had a caravan yet, where do you think that would be?
Oh, no doubt. Coast to coast Australia.
That would be awesome.
That'd be the easiest one. There were some plans, and there were people that had traveled in South America with their Airstream back in the 50s. But that's a real difficult place to travel in. It would be it'd be much longer than Africa or around the world, probably. The roads aren't necessarily the same, but that would be my second choice, would be South America.
Now, back in the day when you were scouting and you were looking at maps, how often would you go down a road and then it wouldn't match what was on the map because something had changed?
Well, all the roads were on the map, so that was never a problem.
Did the maps ever lead you wrong?
I don't think there was ever anything wrong. Most every place there was signage, and there was also normally just one main road. You know, you're not all of a sudden going to come to a Y and say, "Oh, do I go to the left? Do I go to the right?" So, yeah, there's with the maps and knowledge of where you're going, that really wasn't a problem.
That's amazing. Are there any other questions that anyone would like to submit to this chat? Obviously, so it's not just coming from the same couple of people.
Well, there's questions that have come up that I didn't catch in time to read.
As of right now, I think we've covered everything from the chat.
On the
Here we go.
Yeah, thank you. On the African route, was the entire route paved all the way from Cape Town on up?
How did we know there were going to be really bad roads? Well, I don't think we did, because our plans and our schedule had us going from Nairobi to Addis Ababa in X number of days, probably 5 days, maybe 6 days, probably 5. And it took us almost 2.5 weeks because of non-existent roads, also monsoons making mud axle deep. So that's really the worst of the worst. So in the Belgian Congo, there were a lot of washboard roads. And when you travel 10, 15, 20 miles bouncing with every little washboard, that's sort of something too.
Dale, I saw the picture you posted recently of that giant wagon wheel with all those trailers packed in there like sardines in a tin. How long did it take them to get people parked and unparked like that?
I can't tell you too much about unparking, but parking, you have a crew, and you just put them into the lane and park them. It's just a matter of having a good volunteer force, and there weren't any little golf carts in that day either. It was all done by that, and I had another question from Steve.
It says, what was the shortest mileage travel day?
I can't imagine 75 may have been going from Johannesburg to Pretoria. It was a close run.
Now, what was the longest you had ever gotten stuck? You know, how long was the longest person stuck for, I guess?
You want me to talk about the desert?
Sure.
Sure. Well, Pete Turner, our photographer, who was hired by Airstream to do advertising pictures with the Rolleiflex. He had 3 Nikon cameras that he had on his chest with different strap levels, different lenses and film. Plus, he had a motion picture camera. Well, on the desert, he decided to go on the desert. By the way, there were only 7 of the group that wanted to go across the Nubian desert. So Pete went along, both for the photography and Wally. Well, I don't know if you know much about Army volunteers. An Army volunteer is, you may not have volunteered, but you're a volunteer anyway. So Wally said if they wanted to go across the desert, that it would be necessary for all 3 of the auxiliary vehicles to go. And so somewhere along the line, Pete Turner's axle broke. And so Arturo Reese, or Art Reese, the mechanic, was towing that. And the scout truck was part of the group trying to get up with the caravan. And so we hit a really bad standing point. It took us 10 full hours of work to actually get out of the sand and to get back with the caravan. And yeah, it was very harassed. By the way, I had a Swiss Army knife that I bought in 1956. And so somewhere in that sand, there's my knife. I did replace it when I got to Zurich after the end of the African caravan. But that was a major loss because I used that knife for everything. I had to cook a meal. I don't know if any of you are aware of the fact that I was a cook for Nick and I, and he was the dishwasher for Nick and I. And so while we were stuck in the sand, the prior stop before we started across the Nubian desert, I bought some rice. The rice was Chinese rice. And so it's time to cook one of the meals. And so I'm cooking for 3 of us now, not 2. So I thought, well, whatever my main meal was, I'd also have some rice. So I got my rice out and had the water boiling. And I noticed that my rice is crawling. There's rice worms or rice something crawling. And then so what the hell? I boiled the rice, put in some black pepper, and nobody even knew they had extra protein that night.
Great story. I love it.
You know, there's Airstream stories too, but you know, there's so much. I've been thinking over all the little things in my life. How really Wally and my mother met in 1931. My mother said, well, there may have been some contact with Wally when I was young, but he was 10 years older than I was. And so if I was 6 years old, he would be 16. And if he was 16, obviously he's not that interested in his 6-year-old child. Uh, uh, I mean, there's, yes, family hello and all of that. But it wasn't until my mother came and father came to California in 1931 from Pittsburgh that the period of time from 31 to 55, Wally was able to really get to know my mother. And it wasn't just out of the blue that he selected my mother. He built up a trust and a relationship, confidentiality, all of the things that you need for somebody that's going to be second in command of your caravans, and primarily putting them all together. So this 24 years of knowing each other. And by the way, I have some scrapbooks that Samantha copied for me. They're now in the archives. But in going over the pages, my mother was meticulous, page after page of handwriting. And I was surprised at so many gatherings. And it said, well, who attended? And to find Wally and his first wife's name, that they were in and out of my life as a young child, as a baby even. So I literally grew up around Wally also.
Did Wally have any favorite sayings that you still remember?
Well, I love what I really love is how he would handle meetings. He'd get the bullhorn, and for some reason he loved two-wheel vehicles. I mean, if you see the picture in Africa, he had like a Vespa on the front of his truck. In the back of the truck in storage would be a small two-wheel bicycle, and so he always had some type of little vehicle or two-wheeled vehicle. And so I always thought there's one thing, and it's not a whole quotation or whatever, but it's basically who he was. He would be meeting time, he would get on his vehicle and be pedaling around, and he'd have his microphone, and he'd go, hurry, 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 meeting time. And there's a reason why he did hurry, 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 is that during the 30s, I'm quite sure that a lot of the carnies and people from the circuses were buying some of his Masonites to be able to travel around with the circus to live in and then move on to the next location. And there are pictures of one fellow using a bullwhip, taking his beret off his head, and he's grimacing. There's another picture of an Airstream, somebody on a high-rise unicycle. He also learned how to blow up balloons and make animals. So he always had a pocket full of balloons, and if he was around a child, he would blow up and make them a little horse, which is something that you wouldn't normally know about Wally or even think that he would do. So I think there were so many sayings that I have written about Wally. I think that when I give a talk about Wally, I always read the last page in Trailer Travel Here and Abroad, because he talks about how hard it is to climb mountains. But once you climb your mountain and you've successfully done that, you've accomplished. Now those are my words, not his. So to that end, I think that that probably tells you more about who Wally is than anything that you read anywhere else. Travel here and abroad, Wally talking and summing up his entire life.
Dale, I know that you're had things to do with the Heritage Center at the Airstream factory. What are your feelings about the club itself establishing their own historical archive in the old headquarters building?
Well, long overdue, and I've said you have to do the same thing in the club that the Airstream did. I gave 600 what I call hard items. Wally's jacket, the fifth helmet, things that were mine, a lot of arrows, spears, a lot of my mother's things to Baker City, Oregon, because they were a museum. And I felt that I needed to get these things given out so people could enjoy them. And at that time, Airstream didn't have an archive, definitely were far away from ever having a museum. And because they had no archive, there was no protection for any of the items. And once they had an archive, then I felt I could give them things. I feel the same thing about the club, that they need to have a white glove room. They need to have properly air-conditioned temperature room. They need to do the same thing and have a registered archive. And I think that there are a lot of things that I can give the club that belong to my mother, and some things maybe still that belong to Wally or to me. But at this point in time, there isn't the necessary things to really consider it.
Well, hopefully within the next couple of years that project is going to take off and be completed. So I hope to see you at the opening of that one of these days.
Realize that you're talking about me being 88.
You're a young 88.
Because I'm only right now 3.5 years from 90.
Yeah. Well, we'll put it on the fast track then.
But so I keep seeing messages, and because I'm talking, I don't get a chance to read them.
Yeah, so the only thing that's popped, there hasn't been really any questions. We've got Oliver on here. He's just posting some pictures of Wally. So he's finding pictures of Wally like on his bike and on his Vespa, and he's posting them for people to see as you're talking. I haven't seen any other questions. So I'm going to ask another question.
I think that you will find that, and I think it is the 1955 Life magazine. It shows Wally on one of his little two very small, tiny two-wheeled motorcycle or motorbike. It's not a motorbike. And he also in Europe, if when you go and you see the white trailer at the Heritage Center, you'll see that there's a Solex bike on the back. And this is a wonderful thing that Scott Gornson did. He went after to make it look really real by getting the bike, by looking at the items that were in the pictures of the interior, getting a record player, getting the proper transoceanic radio, and a few other things. And I helped him with that. But that is such a beautiful restoration. And it wasn't just Scott, it was his whole family. It was his son and daughter and wife. The four of them are the one that restored that Airstream. And it's really remarkable when you see pictures of how really destroyed the interior was.
Now, you mentioned that Wally had a record player in his trailer. Do you remember any specific records or types of genres that he would listen to?
Well, I think he basically really liked dance music. That's another thing that while he was growing up in Oregon and in California at Stanford, he went to a lot of dances, and I think he even took dance classes. And to say he was a ballroom dancer, I can't answer that, but he did do that type of dancing. And he and Stella and people like Harry and Eileen Halbert from San Diego were good friends, and they go out night clubbing. And most people know Harry because he's pointing at an Airstream trailer with his finger and hand. And so you've seen him many times, even though you may not know his name. So the only thing I can think of and I don't recall the name right now, but there was a specific record that he had, 45, and that's what he had in his house was a 45 player, you know, the old RCA with the red top and all of that. So, and how many records he had, I have no idea. But he didn't have a TV. Yeah, he never owned a TV. He mostly read books, and he listened to news broadcasts. I'm not sure who he listened to in news when he was home in LA, but the best overseas radio station was BBC. It was good news and so on. Voice of America wasn't all that good, and definitely not the Voice of Moscow.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Well, it's 8:55, so we've got time for one more question. I'm not seeing anything in the chat, so whoever types the next one gets the last question with PeeWee.
Well, I see somebody by the name of Price coming right up to her camera, and no, I don't have an open bottle of Fireball. She's giving me kisses. Hello, Price family. See you soon. Yeah.
Early on, somebody asked if you were going to be at the International this year, PeeWee.
Yes, I'm waiting for all of my for Airstream to have all of my what should I say, flights and hotels and a rental car. I do know I'm going to have a caravan there. I have a real problem. I'm not sure how this is going to work out. I'm very semi-negligent, but semi also just not being able to find and do what I need. Right now, I'm not signed up for the 4 talks that I want to give. And so that's one of the things I need to do. Because I went past their deadline, I couldn't find an open form to fill out. But basically, I'm going to do if there's time and they allow it, as long as they're not really tough on me. The first talk will be the same one I gave in Missouri last year about the Heritage Museum. Then I will also have what we just did here, a Q&A. Q&A is always a lot of fun. And then I'm going to do another talk, but I'm going to do it twice. And they're going to be different. Why they're going to be different? I'm going to get up there and make a fool out of myself, going through my memories and talking for an hour, maybe about Africa or about Europe or about my mother's office, or maybe something that happened to me on the first caravan, in Salvador, going down to the lake and going to these little grass-covered bars and watching people dance the mambo to Perez Prado's mambo music, at one time I could do the mambo just by what I saw them doing. Or that one night somebody bringing a jaguar on a leash into one of these little dance places. So that's how the memories work. And then because there's 2 sessions and I have no script except whatever comes to mind, they're both going to be different. And I have to say that when I have a Q&A just like tonight, it's always the same. 80% questions about Africa. Always Africa. And I can understand that.
Well, the Price family have won with the last
Dance
question.
with somebody in the Price family? Well, come on now, babe. Let's dance.
Well,
I'm sure Jenny will want to share a dance with you too, Dale.
Yeah. Yeah, my least favorite sport.
Well, I'm excited to see you in York, Pennsylvania, and I'm sure if anyone else has any questions, they can reach out to you, either you on Facebook or they can ask you in person when they see you.
Will you sometime in the future, if you want to do another one of these? But I think it would be good for I would think it would be very good for people to supply you with a lot of questions so that it doesn't come up on the screen.
I agree. So it's not so we're not trying to pull from the crowd. But anyway, I really appreciate everybody that hopped on tonight, and I'm excited to see everyone real soon.
And I also want to, say the same thing that James just said. Dale, we really appreciate you. We appreciate your sponsorship and support for the VAC and everything you've done for, the club over the years and the contributions of your mother and your family. It's an amazing story. Thank you for sharing it with us.
Oh,
Thank you, my
well,
friend.
you know how I got into all of this? My mother had passed away and I'm at her home. And Susan calls me and gives me a telephone number and a name. Name was Russ Banham. And so I call Russ, and Russ says, I'm writing a book for Airstream called Wanderlust, Airstream at 75, and I'd like to interview you, and we'll spend 30 minutes talking. Well, I don't know what I said or what I did. And he said, oh, I see we're going to spend a lot of time together. So we did probably 60, 70, 80 hours of conversation, and with pictures and letters and documents. He had to go back to Airstream and said, well, I have additional information and I need you to allow another 18 pages to be put into the book. And so that was sort of my starting, but the real starting was 2 years later. At that time, I had met Fred Coldwell, and so he invited me to go to Breckenridge to Rocky Mountain Vintage Airstream Club rally in as I said, in Breckenridge. And I actually took documents and things that Fred had never seen. In other words, what I had did not exist anywhere else in the Airstream world. And so I opened the truck and he looks, he sees things, he looks. And as I tell people now, we had to throw all that away because Fred drooled on it and ruined everything that I took, which is not true. But at that time, I had a Q&A, and I didn't realize that people were going to ask me questions for 3 hours. And that was sort of overwhelming. However, they had a margarita machine. So it was a happy 3 hours. And so that's really the first big talk that I gave. I had no idea that in my mind and things that have been stored up for my lifetime, because I never had any reason to talk about anything. I really didn't. And so I never knew that anybody was ever interested. And so now I also have learned this. I have done so much of my lifetime that's related to the Airstream world. By the Airstream world, that's the vintage club, that's Airstream, that's the factory, that's people that make jewelry, people that write books. So I have an umbrella, the Airstream world. And that is the best way that I can put it. And so I knew that because I had received so much as a young man, that I could never really give back. Once I knew people were interested, I could never give back everything that I received. And so that's part of the reason why I'm here talking to you tonight, is trying to give back those things that I received. And I don't know if everybody knows my 8 words. James, I think, knows my 8 words, don't you?
I don't know if I do or if I don't.
Well, my 8 words are very simple. Airstream is the conduit. First 4 words. Camaraderie is the reward. I can't put it any more simple as to what the club means to Airstream and what Airstream means to the club, is because those 8 words is everything that we belong to or believe in. So that's my sayonara, my 8 words.
Well, thank you again, my friend, and I'm excited to when we do this again.
Yeah, let's do it again. By the way, how many of you actually go to the podcast with Chris and Gina? If you don't do it, I just did their longest podcast before editing, 2 hours, and we're going to have another session, and they're going to I think release it probably around the time of the International as their 50th podcast. But I plan to talk with them again, and so that was good.
Yep, they are great people. If you get a chance to listen into the Riveted podcast, you can hear all sorts of amazing stories. Well,
Thank you, James. As always, as within the club, as president and coming up the ladder, you'll always put on great things, and I'm so happy for you and the club that you're now on the committee or the council, because it was so important this year to get the right people to be the rudder and the sail and the guiding light for the club. So congratulations, and the same thing for Jenny.
well, thank you. We're both
Thank
excited
you.
to lead the club in a
by
bright
the way,
future.
John, is Jenny back from Portugal?
Yes, she is. She's working the phones, we'll put it that way.
Okay, I was just curious. I didn't know she was in Portugal, so I woke her up, you know. I wanted to talk to her to congratulate her on being on the council.
Yeah.
And sleepy, you know, she's sleepy, and so I had to apologize. But how the heck I know that? Anyway, give her my best.
Will do. She can't wait to see you in York, as same with me. So
Okay,
have safe travels.
Safe travels, everybody, and we'll see you real soon.
good to see all of you. I see somebody in my corner here called the Price family. I'm getting way back. I'm gonna hook 'em horns. What can I say? This is wonderful, being able to see all of my friends.
Yeah. Great.
Have a good evening, everyone. Bye, James.
See you
Bye,
guys.
Damon.
See you guys.
Jay Moran.
Thank you,
Price
Damon.
family. Bye-bye, y'all.
Bye now.
Bye.